It's 9:30 again, and we'll move to item number 11. This is a public hearing to consider the Mid-Coast Local Coastal Plan update and amendments, and Mr. Monowitz is here to make the initial presentation.
Good morning, President Gordon, Honorable Supervisors, Mr. Bosch, Mr. Murphy. I'm Steve Monowitz. I'm the Long Range Planning Services Manager and Interim Deputy Director for the Planning and Building Department, and I'm here to deliver some good news and not so good news for you this morning. The good news is that we are nearing completion of a 10-year effort to update our local coastal program. This will be a major milestone towards completion of the department's work plan and will help free up some of the resources we need to complete other important aspects of the general plan update. The not so good news is that in order to obtain Coastal Commission final certification, the county will need to agree to several policy and ordinance changes required by the Commission that raise serious concern. These include all of the changes that were identified as being problematic during the December 1st, 2009 Board of Supervisors hearing, which were not revised by the Commission when it took action on December 12th. Now that the Commission has taken final action, it's up to the county to determine how it wants to respond. The options available are to accept all the changes, and I emphasize all because the Coastal Commission regulations do not allow the county to select which changes it will agree to. The county can reject the changes, which would keep the current LCP in place as is. The county could create a resubmitted version of the amendments for Coastal Commission consideration. And then finally, the county could request an extension to the 6-month time frame it has to accept the Coastal Commission modifications. Before I get into the details associated with all those options, I want to give an overview of the 3 critical factors that really need to be considered as we try and reach a final conclusion. The first factor to consider, which it will be the focus of my presentation this morning, is that accepting the Coastal Commission changes will have significant impacts on future development and the permitting process. The second factor to consider is that rejecting the Coastal Commission amendments will result in the loss of the beneficial changes that were included in the county's proposal and keep the current LCP as is. The third factor to consider, which I won't spend any more time on this morning unless there's questions, is that resubmitting the amendments will consume limited resources needed to complete other priority projects for the department. In terms of the process to reach a final conclusion, staff is recommending a 2-step process. For the purpose of today's hearing, we are recommending that we take an objective evaluation of the modifications recommended by staff and study the potential consequences of accepting or rejecting those. We're not recommending that the board take final action today. That will be the second step at a subsequent public hearing that's tentatively scheduled for May 11th. The board has until June 10th to either accept the Commission's modifications or request an extension, so if necessary, a third public hearing could be scheduled for June 8th. So let's jump into the issues associated with accepting the Coastal Commission modifications. The first, and perhaps one of the most significant issues, is the lot retirement requirement. This requires new land divisions, including conditional certificates of compliance, to acquire existing vacant lots with equivalent development potential and to restrict future use of those lots to open space. There are several consequences to consider with respect to this modification. The first is the impediments it will create to infill development. In addition to creating obstacles for subdivisions, the lot retirement requirement will remove existing vacant urban lots from the inventory of land available to meet local and regional housing needs. Eliminating the development potential of existing vacant urban lots also raises long-term maintenance concerns. It's unclear who would take responsibility for ensuring that these lots do not become dumping grounds or weed-infested fire hazards. Another concern is the amount of work and analysis that will be required to implement this requirement. This includes evaluating the development potential of lots proposed for retirement and executing the legal agreements necessary to preserve them as open space. Finally, the lot retirement requirement raises legal concerns. If accepted and implemented, the county will need to defend itself against any potential legal challenges to this requirement. The second issue of concern regarding the Commission's modifications is their proposed well prohibition. These policies prohibit new private wells within the urban area until a groundwater management plan is developed and incorporated into the local coastal program. They also require existing development served by wells to connect to the public water system when connections are available. Acceptance of this policy raises the following concerns. First, it will essentially create a temporary moratorium on new development that requires a coastal development permit in Montara and Moss Beach, where there are no water connections currently available. It will also restrict development in El Granada and Miramar to the limited number of water connections available through the Crystal Springs pipeline project. Other concerns include unresolved questions about how the well policies are to be implemented. These include questions about how they will be applied to the expansion of existing development that relies on wells, and how an applicant or the county will be able to determine when a public water connection is reasonably available, given the fact that connections are bought and sold on the private market. Perhaps the most significant concern about the Commission's well policies is whether an area-wide prohibition is necessary or appropriate based on the status of the groundwater basins at this time. Planning and Building Department has received an administrative draft of the Phase 3 groundwater study, which provides some valuable information in this regard. Based on a preliminary review of its findings, the report indicates that the last 2 years of lower than average rainfall has not constrained groundwater storage, and that there is no evidence of groundwater shortage or seawater intrusion during the 2009 dry season. As documented by prior studies, the Phase 3 report describes the significant variations between the different subbasins, which raises questions regarding an area-wide approach as recommended by the Commission. Accepting the Commission's modifications will limit the ability of the county to take a basin-specific approach as new information is developed. Finally, like the lot retirement requirement, the Commission's proposed wells policies also raise legal concerns. If accepted, the county will need to defend potential legal challenges from private property owners that allege the well prohibition denies them a reasonable economic use of their property. Without sound scientific evidence to justify the proposed prohibition, the county's ability to defend itself may be compromised. On to the third issue, Commission changes with growth limits. The Commission policy modifications reduces the maximum allowed growth rate from 75 residential units per year to 40 residential units per year. And it also prohibits development other than the 40 allowed residential uses and coastal act priority uses until local roadway levels of service improve. The concern about this is that this will at least temporarily prohibit neighborhood commercial, office, manufacturing, and light industrial uses. These type of developments will create new opportunities for local services and employment that could help alleviate the traffic concerns. So we think it's unfortunate that they would be prohibited by the Commission's policy modifications. This concern is exacerbated by the fact that it's unknown how long the prohibition will last. It depends upon when and if the minimum thresholds of service are achieved. This presents monitoring problems because one of the thresholds has to do with traffic during peak recreation periods, which is not currently being monitored. The fourth issue has to do with grandfathering. The Coastal Commission's modifications delete provisions that limit the application of amendments to projects proposed after the date of its effectiveness. And it adds new language that applies the new policies and ordinances to pending projects. Concerns about this is that it's been a long-standing county policy to apply development standards in place at the time an application is submitted, and to limit the application of new standards to applications submitted after the new standards are adopted. The intent of this policy is to avoid changing the rules on applicants that have made an investment to design their projects to comply with the rules in place at the time. Currently pending projects that would be affected by removal of the grandfathering provision include the Big Wave project and up to 11 other projects that may rely on wells as a source of water. It will also impact 3 subdivision projects that would be subject to the lot retirement requirement, and it would prohibit 3 pending non-residential, non-coastal act uses proposed in Princeton. It would also affect 1 residential project currently proposed on the Burnham Strip. Issue 5 has to do with the restrictions on public works capacities. The Commission's changes restrict the capacity of public works projects to that which can be supported by existing or foreseeable capacity of other infrastructure. Now, while the Planning and Building Department agrees that the interrelated capacity issues need to be considered during the review of public works projects, the restrictive policy language recommended by the Commission link these issues in a manner that requires a solution for each infrastructure constraint to be developed and implemented essentially at the same time. This will pose a potentially unsolvable problem for needed roadway and water supply improvements. Issue number 6 has to do with land use priorities. The Commission's modifications requires public works projects to set aside capacity for Coastal Act priority uses before they set aside capacities for local land use priorities such as affordable housing. Since most of the available water is already spoken for, the primary implication of this change is on new water supply projects, and the concern is if those new projects have limited capacity, they may not be able to serve local priorities such as affordable housing. The final issue of concern that the county presented to the Commission on December 10th, which was not changed by the Commission, has to do with rezoning the Devil's Slide bypass area to open space. Now, the county shares the Commission's objectives to maximize recreational opportunities and the open space values of this area. However, the issue is timing. Rezoning this area prior to the completion of an access plan may unnecessarily restrict land uses in areas that are not needed for access and recreation. So now we'll move on to the ramifications of rejecting the Commission's modifications. And as I mentioned earlier, this will mean the temporary loss of the beneficial changes included in the county's proposal. And I say temporary because the county will always have the opportunity to pursue these beneficial changes as part of future amendments. So the beneficial changes included in the county's proposal include updated build-out estimates. Now, these provide a more accurate estimate about the amount of water and wastewater treatment capacity that will be needed to serve the full extent of build-out allowed by the LCP. While it would be unfortunate to lose the improved accuracy of these estimates, it really would not have any substantial impact on the planning and development processes. These estimates are really guidelines. They don't provide a regulatory standard of review for public works projects that would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. The county's amendment package include a reduced growth rate. The current LCP allows up to 125 residential units per year. The county proposed to lower that to 75. The Commission is going to 40 now. Loss of the reduced growth rate to 75 is probably not a significant issue given the fact that the current growth rate is under 40 units per year. We don't expect that under current market demands that there'll be a demand for anywhere near 75 units per year. So the loss of that county proposal is not significant. Another beneficial change included in the county's submittal are enhanced open space protection and resource opportunities. These include a prohibition on residential uses in the Burnham Strip, reduced floor height and reduced floor area and height limits in the RMCZ and PAD districts, and requirements for pedestrian improvements along Highway 1. Rejecting the Commission's policy changes will hamper efforts to retain the open space values of the Burnham Strip and eliminate the new standards intended to improve residential development quality in RM and PAD zoning districts. Despite the loss of these standards, other existing policies related to view protection and design compatibility would provide the county with an adequate basis to achieve the same objectives that were intended by the amendment package. Similarly, the loss of the policy to require pedestrian enhancements in conjunction with roadway projects would not prevent the county from pursuing such improvements during its permit review of such projects. The county's amendment package also included improved housing and infrastructure policies. These are incentives for affordable housing units, including greater flexibility regarding parking standards. Rejecting the Commission's modifications will result in the continued application of existing parking standards, which does pose some hardships for the development of smaller lots that provide good opportunity for infill development of more affordable units. Nevertheless, the county does have some flexibility in applying these parking standards through the parking exception process. With respect to infrastructure policies, the county amendments include new standards to reduce traffic on Highway 1, among other ways, by requiring a traffic demand management plan for any project that generates more than 50 trips a day. Although the loss of the amendment would remove this as a mandatory requirement, it would not eliminate the county's ability to apply reasonable mitigation measures during project reviews. Finally, the county amendment package includes improved water quality protection policies. These limit new impervious surfaces and establish new winter grading controls. If the county rejects the Commission's modifications, the loss of these policies would be unfortunate because project designers and reviewers would not be provided with quantifiable and specific standards that help implement water quality protection objectives. Nevertheless, the county will retain its ability to require sufficient and appropriate methods of water quality control by applying its existing stormwater pollution prevention program. So, in summary, the major issues associated with the acceptance of the Commission's policy modifications are the consequences they'll have on infill development opportunities, on permit processing and monitoring requirements, on pending projects and the county's policies regarding grandfathering, and finally, the potential need for the county to defend itself against legal challenges regarding the lot retirement requirement and the well prohibition. On the other side of the coin are the ramifications of rejecting the Commission's modifications, which will result in the loss of the beneficial changes I just described. So in comparing the consequences of either action, I think it's worthwhile to note that many of the policies recommended by the Commission have some degree of inevitability because the Commission has appellate authority for some coastal development permits. So irrespective of whether or not the county agrees to these policies, public works projects, subdivision projects are all appealable to the Coastal Commission, and the Commission may indeed apply these policy approaches irrespective of how the county responds to the modifications. Therefore, the county needs to weigh whether its concerns about these policies outweigh the fact that they are likely to be applied by the Commission through the appeals process. So I'll conclude with the slide that summarizes the options for the board to consider and give you a reminder that the purpose of today's hearing is to study these options rather than to make a final decision. Staff anticipates scheduling a follow-up hearing on May 11th, at which time we will present a recommended course of action and provide any additional information the board may need to reach a final conclusion. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Supervisor Tissier.
I have a quick question, and it goes to what you just mentioned on the Coastal Commission has the appellate authority anyway. So why would we put ourselves in a legal position to be sued if in the end they can do it anyway? So you've got a lot retirement and well protection that if we just said no to that, they could go ahead and do it anyway. So I guess I'm kind of confused as to why would the county put itself in that potential legal position and be challenged and have to spend money defending something when in the end the Coastal Commission can do it anyway. I don't quite follow that logic. I mean,
Well,
I
Mr.
follow it,
Murphy?
I don't understand.
Yes, and it is kind of a almost unique situation that we have here where, we are the body that issues permits in the first instance, and we are the body that has land use regulatory authority and adopts the regulations. They're subject to certification by the Coastal Commission. I think over the course of the 30 years that we've been doing this, we've certainly had disagreements as to the extent that authority. Sometimes we believe some of the requirements that they believe are appropriate for our LCP go too far. We're always going to have this problem. I think what's on the table for the board is to decide from the standpoint of whether under the Coastal Act, this set of regulations is appropriate for what this board wishes to accomplish. You're always going to be facing that situation where the Coastal Commission and their appeal authority may find a basis to impose some conditions that we felt are inappropriate. That's always going to be the case. So, I guess it's tough to say. You can always say, well, gee, if we're always going to be subject to legal attack, let's not do anything. But I think what we're trying to do is find out where that point is, where this board feels comfortable that they've developed a plan that can withstand legal challenge. I agree that the lot retirement policy and the well policy are the two that present the greatest risk. There's, to my knowledge, there's no case out there on lot retirement policy and the question of whether it's appropriate to require a landowner to spend money to buy a lot that was created through planning that is historic planning. I think that the nexus requirement there it's an interesting argument, and I'm not quite sure where I could see the arguments on both sides of that. The water well policy, we've always from the very beginning had a concern about because it's very clear in the state constitution that the water underlying property is that property owner's water. They have a right to access it. On the other hand, there's plenty of authority that because groundwater needs to be regulated, that like other regulations, you can regulate to a degree. The question is always when you issue a moratorium, do you have, as Steve said, do you have the basis to be able to go into court and argue that you had the authority to basically prohibit a use, and that's where the argument's always going to go. So, that's sort of the background on these two issues, which I think are the most difficult ones.
Adrian, to follow up?
I just want to kind of raise that because that sort of stood out to me in reading this this weekend. The other one that sort of strikes me as well for hoping for discussion on the growth limits. There's sort of a catch-22. You can't build till the infrastructure's in place, but by not building, oftentimes building brings mitigation measures and dollars to be able to do the infrastructure. So I mean, you're sort of between a rock and a hard place. Those kind of things are really no-win situations. So you'll always be at a standstill. I guess I'm having trouble kind of digesting that one as well. Okay. So I just throw those two in particular that struck me as, putting us in a position of no position. You know what I mean? It's kind of, anyway, that's.
All right. I think Supervisor Church?
Well, I just to follow up on that, I was curious about that as well, and particularly about the fact that the Coastal Commission can do this since it's appealable. They can do implement certain policies anyway, regardless of the fact that they are not adopted by this board, and regardless of the fact that they're not a part of the LCP.
Yes,
I mean, I'm having a little trouble
Right.
understanding that. Even as a lawyer,
Right.
it seems to me there has to be certain standards
Exactly.
on the, that we're all aware of. And what I'm gathering from this is that there's a subjective interpretation by the Coastal Commission.
I think that is a perfect way of describing it. The bottom line is the Coastal Commission has to do two things when a matter comes to them on appeal. They're supposed to apply our LCP policies, and they have to find that the project is consistent with the Coastal Act. I think where you get the difference when permits go up on appeal is exactly what you're saying, is how much leeway within the confines of the overall policies of the Coastal Act does the Commission have to condition a particular permit, even if they can't find a specific policy in the LCP. We know that they do have some authority there because often permits go up on appeal and they reissue a permit with additional conditions. There is some leeway. But I think the point you're making, Supervisor Church, is correct. They have to look to our LCP. If they can't look and find a policy that requires someone to retire a lot, then they're going to have to find another rationale. That's more difficult to do. But I'm not saying, and I think what Mr. Monowitz is saying is that's the kind of analysis they go through, so that a lot of these issues, and I think it's important for the debate, is to understand that because the board may decide we're not going to adopt that policy, the Coastal Commission may find through their with their broad permit authority to still impose conditions that accomplish much the same thing. So it's not a perfect one-for-one. They can't ignore our LCP. They don't prepare the LCP. That's why we're going through this process. They can't impose it on us. But I think the point being made here is they certainly have leeway through the permit process to condition projects to accomplish a lot of the same thing.
If the LCP is silent on a particular point, but if the LCP expressly is very explicit as to a particular policy, then I gather the Coastal Commission must be guided by the LCP and cannot enact their own policy in contravention to a specific policy on appeal.
And I think that's a fair statement. The interesting question the perfect example of where that might come in is if the board decided to have a policy saying under no circumstances can you require a lot to be retired when someone comes in for a permit. In other words, it's sort of like a prohibition on that sort of a condition, how the Coastal Commission might react. But in most cases, that's not the way our LCP is designed. It either is silent or it defines how you're going to condition a project. And it's in that vague area when it gets up on appeal that the difference often occurs.
Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Monowitz, you said that the draft of the groundwater study is finished. Do you have a timeline for commenting and potential adoption or rejection?
We're working with the consultant at this point to get a public review draft released within the next 2 weeks. We haven't established a time frame for commenting. In the past, we've done 30 days or longer, but we certainly intend to do that.
Is it feasible it could be adopted by the end of this year, or not adopted?
It's certainly feasible that this board could consider its findings by the end of this year.
Thank you.
Before we take public testimony, I just want to clarify one thing, Mr. Murphy. We submitted a revision to the commission. They then said we're adding some other stuff. And if we accept what they added, we become liable, not them?
It becomes our plan, and if we issue or we deny a permit, because recall, once we adopt the plan and it's certified, it's our LCP. If someone comes in for a permit and we deny the permit based on its noncompliance with the plan, that denial is not appealable to the Coastal Commission. It ends here, and we're the party to the lawsuit. That's correct. If it is appealed and the Coastal Commission takes it over and issues a de novo permit, it is their permit, and they are the ones that are subject to being sued. That's correct.
So is that like an unfunded mandate? You don't have to answer that question. It was rhetorical. We have, as policy, generally given folks 2 minutes to address us. The current batch of speaker slips that I have, and I'm going to ask if anyone has not turned in a slip to do so now, as I won't accept any following this. This current batch will take us to over an hour. And I'm going to start. We'll get a couple in, and then we're going to have to take a break. But I think we've got about 10 minutes or so left on the tape, so we'll keep going here for the moment. So let me start with Catherine Slater-Carter.
Well, thank you very much. I thought I'd be speaking near the end, but now I can leave early if I care to. I want to thank the Board of Supervisors for funding this LCP update. It's a 30-year-old document and badly in need of being updated. I'm going to speak quickly in bullet points to cover 2 minutes. One, the county needs to look at the institutional barriers to achieving what's in the LCP and what you're trying to achieve. Right now, it costs $3,800 plus the title search to merge 2 lots in the urban area. I thought the $400 merger fee had been waived, but it's not any longer, and it is also $1,700 each lot for a certificate of compliance. This is going to discourage lot merger. Half Moon Bay doesn't allow wells in its city limits. The county could follow suit. As far as lot retirement, there is lot retirement in Half Moon Bay. It was imposed by the Coastal Commission. It withstood court challenge. For water, wells wouldn't be needed if we had a reliable water supply. In Montara and Moss Beach, one of the things the county can do is to ensure that the Caltrans right-of-way on the east side of Montara has allowances for Montara Water and Sanitary District to be able to drill wells, to be able to supply water for our urban area. 2, the county can work with WSD to ensure reliable, affordable water from the airport aquifer. There are solutions that can be reached. I'd be happy to talk to folks. 3, the cost of additional pollution from increased development is going to be there. It's going to be a suit for the county. It's going to be something the county's going to have to clean up. You heard what Kellick said about the harbor. The demand for urban services is going to continue to go up. I've lived there for over 30 years. The population has doubled. Short of the mitigation fees for stormwater, we've had no major improvements to meet the urban needs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yori Daher, followed by Carol Smith.
Good morning. My name is Yuri Daher. I live in Princeton, almost 30 years, my only home in this country. And also I have a business for commercial fishermen in just across the street from my home in Princeton. And I really like to ask you to accept the Commission's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carol Smith?
Carol Smith. I am until recently, I was vice chair of Atherton's General Plan. I am a director on the San Mateo County Parks Foundation. I'm co-founder of the Eco Green Group, a 5,000-member consortium, and I'm a 25-year member of the Sierra Club, and I'm a coastal land owner. I oppose the Coastal Commission's updates to the LCP. I think it's bad planning. I think it's bad for the environment. I think staff did an outstanding job of outlining for you what the pros and the cons were. And I had lots of things to talk about, but the things that I don't think have been covered so far by staff were that if you do the lot retirement program, only wealthy people are going to be able to afford to do anything over there. The children that are growing up over there are not going to be able to buy houses to live in the community that they grew up in. And who's going to take care of the cost of those abandoned lots? And lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Coastal Commission and the legal process. Right now, the Coastal Commission does things that we don't think are legal, but there's really no consequence aside from being able to appeal them. For example, they came up with a policy that said if you developed a lot and it was visible from the ocean, then you could not put a house on that lot. That on appeal did not withstand appeal, and it was rejected, but the Coastal Commission still uses that as a standard against projects. The Coastal Commission is their attorney bills are completely funded by the Attorney General's office at this point. There is conversation in the Assembly that those bills be transparent so that you and I can look at what is the Coastal Commission costing us, what are they achieving. I think that's good, transparent government, but that also may get to the heart of the conversation that you were having earlier about, well, if the Coastal Commission just makes up the rules anyhow and they're the appellate body, then why don't we just let them deal with it? Well, what will happen, I hope, if they are actually held accountable for their bills, then all of the taxpayers in California, will be able to see what they're costing us. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have come to the end of the tape, so we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back to resume public testimony. All right, we are going to resume, and if I could ask you to please take your seats. And we'll start with Baird Wheatley, or Wheatley maybe, followed by Lenny Roberts.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me jump up. I speak on behalf of a property owner. I'm an architect. We submitted a plan with the well permit over a year ago. We were very close to having it finished, and it sounds like this thing will be embroiled for longer than the time it takes. But I just wanted to urge the commissioners to take into account the permits that are already in the pipeline and that they not be affected if the conditions are imposed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Lenny Roberts, followed by Ted Guntran.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Lenny Roberts. I'm speaking for Committee for Green Foothills, and I think you have all received the letter that I sent to you on Friday. If not, I have some additional copies here for you, so I'll just give these to you. We, with Committee for Green Foothills, wants to commend the county and the Coastal Commission staff for working together to resolve many of the issues that initially were identified by both groups. And in December, the Commission unanimously approved the suggested modifications. So I found it kind of interesting. I was at the hearing, as was Supervisor Gordon and planning staff. There wasn't anybody there opposing the Coastal Commission staff recommendations to with the modifications that they were suggesting. So now you'll hear from the opposition that they did not. So I think that the staff report is unduly pessimistic. I think that all the issues that are still outstanding can be worked out, and I would urge you to ask the staff to come back with you for the ways that the county can meet the requested modifications. My final, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but for example, if in the last 5 years the average annual number of building permits have been only 38, and the growth limit is 40, that is a completely workable thing. What happens over a year as the permits get used and they reach number 40, somebody might not get his permit for a month or two at the end of the year, but that's really not a significant issue. So I would urge you to continue to work on it, and I think that you can find ways to accept the modifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Ted Guntrin, followed by Leonard Warren.
Good morning, Honorable Supervisors. My name is Ted Guntrin. I reside in 1351 Cedar Street in Montera. I want to thank you for having this very important meeting. And I am against the California Coastal Commission changes to the Mid-Coast update of the LCP for the main reason that they have neglected to hear the voice of the local residents of the coast. They've come in as bullies, and they're trying to enforce their policies on the people on the coast. One of the changes that I disagree with is limiting commercial units on the coast side. Not only will this affect San Mateo County and Half Moon Bay City of a potential tax revenue stream, it will also encourage a growing workforce population of commuters. Everyone that lives on the coast, on the workforce, commutes over the hill. That adds pollution to the environment. What I envision the coast to be is living green. You work, you live, you play, all in the same area. And by accepting this change from the CCC, we will not be living green. The second issue is the prohibition of wells. Montera and Moss Beach will be greatly impacted compared to the other cities on the coast. The simple reason is they cannot get a water connection, as Steve has said, from the Montera Water District. So if you can't use the water from your ground, you can't get a water connection, your land value is useless. Last thing I'd like to say is that I've submitted an article that I received yesterday from my father, Joe Guntrin. The San Francisco Examiner said that the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission is considering tapping into well water underneath the Sunset District to help 10% of the demand of water. So now they have local water and water from Hetch Hetchy. Again, I'm against the California Coastal Commission changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Leonard Warren, to be followed by Barry Parr.
Good morning, Mr. President, honorable supervisors. There are on the coast side currently 15 local elected officials who are voted on only by people in the unincorporated area. I believe at least 13 and possibly all 15 of them support the Coastal Commission position. If this was put to a vote of the citizens, I think the citizens would vote to approve the Coastal Commission position. A lot of the arguments, if not most or all, in the staff report are straw man arguments that are set up specifically to argue against approving the Coastal Commission modifications. And I urge you to approve the modifications and then fine-tune it with minor amendments that can be submitted at any time. And if you as the applicant agrees with coastal staff, it goes on consent agenda and it should go right through. An example of one of those would be, I would suggest that you clarify that the lot retirement program does not apply to conditional certificates of compliance to legalize parcels that weren't legally created but that were separately conveyed prior to the effective date of the update. An example of the straw man argument is the houses on the Burnham Strip issue. There will be no more houses on the Burnham Strip due to your board's recent action taking the position that the recording date of the certificate of compliance is when you issue it. And to my knowledge, all of the remaining vacant parcels on the Burnham Strip are not currently legal parcels. Every one of them was split by the highway in 1949. So that's just one example of the straw man argument. And I could go through basically all the rest of them with the same thing. So please approve the Coastal Commission modifications and then submit minor amendments to fine tune it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Barry Parr, followed by Nina Pellegrini.
Good morning. My name is Barry Parr. I live at 1129 Acacia Street in Montera. The folks on the unincorporated Midcoast need your help, and you are our local planning authority, and we need you to protect our communities and our homes. I strongly support all of the Coastal Commission's common sense recommendations, but I want to focus on one since I have a limited time, which is water. The county's own groundwater report says, quote, current pumping rates have lowered the water table to near sea level in dry years and potentially below sea level during very dry years, posing risks of saltwater intrusion. Because the county has not collected adequate data, this probably understates the severity of the risk. Staff says, based on a preliminary review of findings of an unpublished report, that there is no evidence of seawater intrusion in the past. Now, there are two problems, of course. One is this is not a public report. It hasn't been reviewed, so we don't know where the data came from or how the conclusions were drawn. The second is also, obviously, that what happened in 2009 has little or no bearing on what is going to happen in more dry years in the future when more houses on more wells are built. This is a very severe problem, and I'm going to make a prediction right now, which is we may have data that we can use from this preliminary report that's out there by the end of the year, but I will tell you it's going to be inconclusive because the supporting data isn't there. So waiting for this report to answer those questions, I think, is not going to solve the problem. As Mr. Monowitz mentioned, rejecting the Coastal Commission's recommendations is going to lose very many beneficial amendments that the county wants to put in the LCP. By adopting those, the Commission's recommendations, you can put this 10-year ordeal behind us. You can adopt your own beneficial amendments to the LCP. And finally, you can add the Commission's own common sense recommendations to the LCP for the unincorporated Midcoast. Right on time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nina Pellegrini, followed by April Vargas.
Hi, good morning. Supervisors, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I wanted to thank you for all the work that you all have put 10 years working on the LCP update. You have worked with people in the community. We not always agree on everything, but I think you took everybody's opinion from both sides and you made something happen. And I would say stick to it. You did a good job. And when enough is going to be enough, the Coastal Commission is not a totalitarian regime. You represent this community. We should have an LCP by the County of San Mateo. As we've been saying here before, you'll be liable if you adopt their recommendations. So I will say, I read the letter by the Greenfoot Hills, and they're so worried about taking walks on the beach and saving the character of the coast. But they're not looking at the people who are losing their jobs, who our schools have no money, our children are losing a good education. The only thing they want to do is get people walking on the beach. Well, there's not going to be anybody walking on the beach because we're not going to have any resources if we stop all construction on the beach, on the coast, which is what they want. So I commend you, and I thank you, and I hope that you take into consideration and reject the recommendations by the Coastal Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. April Vargas, followed by Pat Bell.
Good morning, President Gordon and members of the board. I'm speaking as an individual. I want to thank this Board of Supervisors, the staff, and Coastal Commission staff, and the commissioners for what's been a very long and very thorough and detailed process. I want to first say that I agree with everything Barry Parr said. He went through a lot of very specific calculations and numbers that I won't repeat, but I just want to very briefly address 3 points in the staff report that appear to be trying to persuade this board about the reasons why you can't adopt the Coastal Commission recommendations. The first is the question of legal liability. I think that County Council did a good job of explaining that no matter what kind of land use decisions the board makes, there's always the chance that there's going to be legal action. It's certainly something that's fiscally of concern, but using as a basis of rejecting what needs to be done on an environmental and social level because there may be legal ramifications, I think is just really falls short. The second is the fact that we're now 30 years since our LCP was adopted. We've been in part of this process now reviewing it for 10 years. I think we can realistically say that this issue will not come up again in this comprehensive a way for probably 25 years. By that time, I predict that with the scarcity of resources locally, regional, and nationally, the kinds of things we looked at today will be seen as absolutely inadequate, and there will be a lot of concern if these aren't adopted. Finally, the practical concern about having to adopt new policies, new monitoring systems. Again, county government standards constantly change, and I believe that using as an excuse, basically, that it would be too hard to get staff up to speed or add new kinds of reviews is, again, not really well-founded. As a member of the Ag Advisory Committee, we're working right now on Williamson Act updates, and new regulations will have to be adopted then. So I would urge you to really do the right thing for now and really for generations to come and find a way to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Bell, followed by Dennis Doherty.
Good morning. I must admit I haven't studied this issue, but I can't imagine why you would want to accept this stuff. Two things that were in the staff report that were just mentioned briefly are very important to me. Affordable housing being one, and neighborhood retail. A lot of people don't think about neighborhood retail, but neighborhood retail allows people to walk to the grocery store or I guess you don't rent videos anymore, but whatever, the dry cleaner and so forth. It makes for a healthier community, a more cohesive community, because you run into your neighbor at the corner store. And there are a lot of benefits to neighborhood retail that get overlooked because you haven't spent the many hours I have fighting for it. But I would urge you to think about those healthy cities impacts, the affordable housing and the neighborhood retail and enriching those communities that are already there instead of having a coastal commission that comes from who knows what planet and says, this is the way you do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Doherty, followed by Laszlo Vesprini.
Good morning, I'm Dennis Doherty. It's been a 10-year process that the staff has put a tremendous amount of time into, and public hearings on the coast, planning commission meetings, and of course at your board. This has come up in front of you guys several times. To adopt the Coastal Commission's amendments would be circumvent that entire process. And I mean, the local government, you guys are elected representatives, not the Coastal Commission. And I'm not sure of the legal framework where, as far as the LCP update process and their role in it, but it sounds like they're essentially writing the LCP, and I don't think that is the intended process. There's a lot of, I expect there'll be a lot of unintended consequences if the amendments were adopted. For instance, as Pat Bell was saying, one good example is neighborhood retail. As somebody else mentioned, the opportunities for jobs on the coast. So I'd urge you to either reject the Coastal Commission amendments or to ask for an extension of time to allow staff to work on this more. Thank you.
Thank you. Laszlo Vesprini, followed by Kirsten Jabe.
Laszlo Vesprini, Moss Beach. Supervisors, I'm here to 100% support the California Coastal Commission's recommendations. and humbly suggest to the Honorable Board to look at these amendments as tools that help the Board to better handle pressures from developers and lawyers for various projects. As you know, for the past 30 years, the LCP has been diluted through the exemptions and use permits to the point where the zoning laws became nearly meaningless. Case in point, Big Wave, where the planning department sees no problems with greenlighting 70 affordable residential units on a W1 waterfront zoning that is explicitly non-residential, and also several hundred more so-called office condos, which is basically a code name for condos. If you choose to reject the Coastal Commission's recommendations, this would cause most projects to go to appeal, which would make projects take longer and more expensive. If you accept it, is a win-win situation for the board, as it would keep control within the board, give you new tools, and keep the cost beautiful. Thanks.
Thank you. Kirsten Jabe, followed by Sharice McHugh.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Jabe. I live in El Granada, and we live in a beautiful area, and this area is obviously beneficial to us who live over there on the coast and believe it's a very important place, and also for the whole county and all the people that like to go visit there. And I'd like to keep it that way for all of us. I believe that we need intelligent growth in our housing and our infrastructure on the coast side. I like the term Pat Bell uses, we need healthy cities. We need to do what makes sense. And I'd like to encourage you to reject the changes from the Coastal Commission. Don't take on the legal challenges. Our permit processing is already way too long. It can take years, and I've heard stories about it taking decades. So if we grandfather in new rules, it doesn't make sense for all those people who have been working so hard. We can't change the rules on them midstream. We need a plan that makes sense for our infrastructure and for our road improvements, and I don't see that here. All I see in the changes is that we're stopping growth with the idea that we're waiting for improvements, but I don't see where the improvements are coming. And there are many impediments to intelligent growth in the Coastal Commission's changes. So I would encourage you to reject the changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharice McHugh, followed by Judy Taylor.
Thank you, Board of Supervisors and Chair Supervisor Gordon. The Chamber supports the county's voluntary effort toward updating the Mid-Coast LCP. We understand the constraints pursuant to the Coastal Act and the need for a cautious approach towards development given the adequacy of existing resources. However, an equally important consideration is the sustainability of the Half Moon Bay coastside community and economy. We are concerned that an unintended consequence of some policies, if approved, will put a halt on business growth and job creation on the coast side. We are concerned and recommend that all low-income housing is supported, not just the HUD, the HUD-funded. The Chamber recommends the LCP focuses not on an increase of car trips, but on an increase of peak trips, allowing for the development of projects that reduce congestion by encouraging local commutes and reverse flow traffic. In 2001, the Chamber, in conjunction with the community leaders on the coast side and coastside residents, performed a comprehensive economic sustainable study, which was presented to the Board of Supervisors. A primary finding and unanimous desire of the committee was to provide workspace for local residents, allowing them to live and work on the coast. We thank you for your efforts in regard to the LCP updates and urge you to reject the current California Coastal Commission modifications. Thank you.
Okay. Judy Taylor, followed by Ann Carey.
Good morning. I feel like the chatty Cathy. You pull the string and get the screed. First off, in terms of the legal liability, the only thing we can say to that is Beechwood. It was that kind of a dispute, and the city of Half Moon Bay paid for it. It was really ironic to me. According to Lenny, there was nobody there speaking in opposition to the changes, and I was there speaking in opposition to the changes at the Coastal Commission. That hearing was held at the same time as our world leaders were in Copenhagen trying to figure out how to get us out of the mess that we're in. And it is extremely ironic to me that the Coastal Act is meant to bring a broader lens to the sustainability issue of the coastal area. And what we have got here is this document is basically our GPS. And we're saying we want to go to Seattle, but we're setting our GPS for Burbank. And we're real confused as to why it is that we keep getting further and further away. And what has happened in this document is it continues to focus all of the efforts on the issue that has been fought and refought and then fought again. And that's whether or not somebody's going to put another stick in the ground. And it's time that we move on from that. We have sustainability issues. El Cerrito is getting written up for their catchment systems and their bioswales for dealing with stormwater. We're going to bury storm tanks in the Burnham Strip. That is not a sustainable thing. We are supposed to be a model for how to do it right. And as Haiti rebuilds, there is not a thing our community can point to say that this is how you do it right. And we've had this environmental rhetoric for over 30 years, but all of our focus is what's going on the other side of the fence. And we need to switch that focus into what's going on inside our walls, in our backyard, in our garage. We are using, in this document, the same planning numbers for water consumption per household as we used 30 years ago. That's just not right. Thanks.
Thank you. Ann Carey, followed by George Mutif.
Good morning, President Gordon and Honorable Board. My name is Ann Carey, and I oppose the Coastal Commission staff's proposed amendments in today's staff report, and I urge the Board to refuse to accept these changes in their entirety. Although I was unable to attend the Coastal Commission meeting in December, I did submit a letter of public input. In regards to the proposed growth limit amendment, in light of the Superior Court decision last month that the City of Pleasanton's growth control policy violates state law, I ask that the county re-examine that the Coastal Commission staff's proposed amendment to determine if re-examine the Coastal Commission staff's proposed amendment to determine if it is in accordance with state law, and I ask that the Board only adopt changes that are in accordance with state law. Second, I urge the Board to reject the Coastal Commission staff's proposed amendment for a new lot retirement policy. This amendment constitutes an unjust taking under the Fifth Amendment, and as written and discussed earlier, the proposed policy requires that if a landowner needs to legalize a parcel to build a home, or wants to divide a parcel into two legal-sized parcels, or any type of minor subdivision, as mitigation for the negative impact on traffic, the landowner will need to donate parcels as open space. According to law, there must be a rational relationship or a nexus between the mitigation for the negative impact of the project, in this case traffic, and the extraction or requirement, in this case a donation of property to open space. And there is no nexus. And second, also according to law, there must be an individualized determination that the extent of the required open space dedication is proportional to the impact of the project. This proposed policy does not provide any type of individualized determination among the building of a single-family home, a minor subdivision, a major subdivision, and among each of these various projects. In addition, there is no factual basis for such a regulation, so I urge the Board to refuse to accept any amendments that are not consistent and according to state and federal law. Thank you.
Thank you. George Mutif, followed by Nicole DiMartini.
Honorable San Mateo County Supervisors, good morning. My name is George Mutif, a resident of Half Moon Bay for over 30 years. I spoke to the Board of Supervisors on this topic in December 2005 and June 2009 in Half Moon Bay. My concerns remain consistent with my previously stated positions. The process has been going on for 10 years now. During that time, you have expended a tremendous amount of county resources and made substantial progress in resolving inconsistencies in the LCP. I appreciate the constant, balanced approach you and your planning department have demonstrated during this very difficult process. It is also obvious, even to the casual observer, that you have given tireless effort in your attempts to negotiate in good faith with the Coastal Commission on multiple points of disagreement. And there have been some successes in that regard. However, it takes effort from all sides to work through all disputed issues, and based on the Commission's letter dated December 10th, 2009, I no longer see willingness by the Commission to continue good faith negotiations. We have now reached the point of action. I am here to respectfully urge you to reject the Commission's recommendations in favor of what you've accomplished so far. The points of disagreement with the Commission that concern me most are prohibition of new wells, lot retirement, reduction of maximum growth rate, public works, and grandfathering. I believe the Commission's position on each of these points is unreasonable and apparently unyielding. It is my opinion that should you accept the Commission's position on these issues, you would be damaging the rights of your constituents, harming the coastside stability, and steering a course for litigation rather than cooperation. If the current Commission is unwilling to recognize and respect the authority given you by the Coastal Act to improve the LCP, then I believe it is imperative that no action be taken until a Commission is in place that recognizes the appropriateness of your proposed LCP changes and supports them. Thank you for your time and your extraordinary efforts in making a good document better and putting your constituents first.
Nicole DiMartini, followed by Jeff Peck.
Good morning, Honorable Supervisors. My name is Nicole DiMartini, and I am Executive Director of Big Wave Group, the nonprofit seeking to build affordable housing for developmentally disabled adults on the coast side. I was also born and raised on the mid-coast. The beaches that were presented earlier in the harbor that are polluted, those are the beaches I grew up playing on, and the water I played in. At the time, no one understood just how polluted they were. But now, here we are, a couple decades later, and we're all a bit wiser about what pollution is in the water and how limited our resources are. One of the proposed amendments from the Coastal Commission staff requires developers to connect to local utilities. There are a number of innovative resource management techniques that could be implemented by developers, by homeowners, that no one would be able to even consider should they be required to connect to the local utilities. These measures go through their own permitting process to ensure that they work with the community. Forcing people to connect to local utilities really robs us of the opportunity to consider what could be beneficial resource management at a lot-by-lot basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Peck, followed by Matt Grocott.
Yeah, hello, my name is Jeff Peck. I live in El Granada. I've lived there about 20 years. Thank you for having us here. I want to thank your staff for making an excellent report. Unfortunately, these modifications from the California Coastal Commission are dead wrong, and I urge you not to pass any of them. The basis of these modifications was to protect the environment, when indeed it does exactly the opposite in many cases, and I'll give you an example. If you have, and I know of one project that does this, it recycles all of its water, it returns more recharges the well from which it takes water, actually puts more water back. It doesn't create any pollution from waste during wet weather at all. You would think that a project like that would be something that you would want to help the environment. According to this, you couldn't build that until traffic got better on Highway 1 and 92. Now, the only way traffic's going to get better in Highway 1 and 92 is if you build commercial projects which allow local people to work nearby. Unless you allow these projects to go forward, you're not going to have any change in the traffic flow. Based on that, and on what the Coastal Act calls for, which is to provide affordable housing, and also not only affordable housing, but it provides that you take care of certain underprivileged classes, such as the disabled. This would prevent projects like Big Wave from being built to help the disabled. It does the exact opposite of what the Coastal Act calls for. It goes against what we want in our county and our LCP, and I urge you, unfortunately, to just reject it, because they're not going to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Grocott, followed by Vic Abadi.
Board President and board members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. My comments refer to the good question of Board Member Adrian Tissier. Obviously, the county has a plan for the coast side, ecologically, economically, and with terms of general land use. I think the county needs to stay the course on its plan for the coast side, even to the point of conflict, if necessary, with the Coastal Commission. And I would just like to point out, our authority as represented as representatives of the people comes from the consent of the governed, and that's what I am as a city council member. As a city council member in San Carlos, that's what you are as board members. The Coastal Commission is not; they're appointed, and so if you have to get into a conflict with them, just remember your authority comes from the people that you govern, and that consent that to you. So if there has to be a conflict, so be it. Thank you.
Okay. Vic Abadi, followed by Dave Byers.
Thank you. Vic Abadi, geologist. I live and work in Montero. Immediately after the close of the staff report, three of you supervisors had questions regarding the risk of legal and financial liability that would attend required lot retirement, and in my opinion, the risk would be greater for prohibiting private water wells in Montero Moss Beach, where people otherwise have no access to water. I believe County Council responded in part, and also a prior speaker noted that, well, sure, anything you do in life these days has legal risk. Yeah, true. That's true in the abstract, but you can hide a lot in generalities. Here, I think especially prohibiting private water wells is specifically contrary to water rights provisions in the state constitution and to the U.S. Constitution's takings clause. So is the county really prepared to accept that legal and financial risk upon if you were to adopt the Coastal Commission's amendments? If you do, please consider doing what Catherine Slater Carter asked, which is to work with Montero Water and Sanitary District to allow us to get additional water supply that would be available for new water hookups. But even so, I leave you with the question, is it wise to accept the legal and financial risk that would attend accepting the Coastal Commission's amendments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dave Byers, followed by Terry Gossett.
Good morning, President Gordon, members of the board. I'm Dave Byers. I have a comment related to what Supervisor Church and Supervisor Tissier said earlier about the Coastal Commission. I stood in front of this board in December 2006 advocating that you approve a permit for a family called the Sterlings. They wanted to build one house on 143 acres. The board unanimously approved the permit. The Coastal Commission appealed it to themselves. They imposed a condition saying that the Sterlings would be unable to do any future subdivision on that parcel, an affirmative agricultural easement. You know what? We had to sue the Coastal Commission. And on Friday, here's what Judge Miriam said about the condition. The imposition of the easement here constitutes an unconstitutional taking, as it is disproportionate to the public impact of the house proposed. Further, the required nexus between the public impact and the affirmative agricultural easement has not been adequately substantiated. The condition imposing the affirmative agricultural easement is hereby stricken. Another unconstitutional condition imposed on a permit. Lot retention, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. This eliminating groundwater permits for wells, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. Steve, one correction in your staff report, not potential legal challenges that are going to be successful. One comment about Big Wave. In October 2005, I went to the planning department. I gave them a check for $30,000 for the applications. We spent $370,000 on an environmental impact report. Now the Coastal Commission is talking about changing the rules for looking at the development, and that's not what the county's been doing in the last 30 years. I've been involved in county land use since 1982. It's unfair, it's discriminatory, and if anybody thinks I'm going to represent a client and a protected class is discriminated and I'm not going to deal with that, they're wrong. Adopt a resolution to reject the changes. Thank you.
Terry Gossett, followed by Neil Merrilees.
Good morning, Honorable Supervisors. My name is Terry Gossett from Moss Beach, and I'm representing Californians for Property Rights. First and foremost, I want to thank you for all your dedication and your professionalism and truly enforcing the Coastal Act in terms of maximizing public participation in this forum. If I had the authority, I'd love to present you with a plaque in that regard, because even though we've had a lot of disagreements, I think it's been fair and balanced and reasonable. I submitted a letter to each of you. I'll read just a portion of it. Your willingness to cooperate and to make compromises with the Coastal Commission staff has been undeniable. Unfortunately, it's also undeniable that your good faith negotiations were rejected on all points by the Coastal Commissioners on December 10th, 2009, signaling that the Commission considers all the remaining differences to be non-negotiable. The message from the Commissioners was clear. They are no longer negotiating with you and expect that you will accede to their position on all points. As the facts summarized in your executive memo cannot hide, the Commission's stance is patently unreasonable and may injure the Mid-Coast. In the regrettable absence of any alternatives for further good faith negotiations, CPR recommends that you reject the Commission demands and retain the existing LCP. I'm not going to go through all the 7 details that Mr. Monowitz went through so ably. I would like to call to your attention, though, with George Bergman, before him, we had 45 meetings or so. And of those 7 issues that are sticking points, only, I think, 3 or 4 came out of the 2 years when the Coastal Commission had no public hearings, and they injected those. So I find that very telling. I could go through my perceptions, the lot retirement and the prohibition of whales and the elimination of grandfathering, those are those. But I had one other comment in regard to Supervisor Tissier and Supervisor Gordon. In terms of the hierarchy between this board and the Coastal Commission, it is held within the Coastal Act itself. If you go to Public Resources Code 3050001 and 512.2, and I'm not an attorney, so I'll leave that up to Mr. Murphy, but when I read that section, and I've coordinated with other people in the coastal zone, our perception is that you have the top hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Neil Merrilees, followed by David Dixon.
Good morning. I'm Neil Merrilees, and I'm here speaking for the Mid-Coast Council. We agreed on this letter that we sent to you, I think yesterday. I think you all have it. But I wanted to go over the 4 points or 5 points very quickly, because I think they're important. First of all, I'd like to recommend that you don't give up. You don't walk away. It'd be easy to throw up your hands and walk away at this point, but please don't. I think you're mostly there, and I think you have a very good point person working on it. The MCC recommends clarifying the lot retirement requirement does not apply when issuing a conditional certificate of compliance to legalize an existing, albeit non-legally created lot. We don't think this was the intention of the Coastal Commission, but it has to be clarified because that is very important. Maintain support for coastal priority development and proposed residential cap. In addition, weight should be given to non-priority commercial development. This development is important and beneficial to the community, both in providing needed services and in lowering the traffic impact. And in terms of the residential cap, we're at 40 now. That's a great negotiating point. It wouldn't kill us to go to 40. Continue reviewing the public works process because in places as defined by the Commission, it appears too cumbersome and independent to be an effective model for actual planning and growth of diverse interconnected elements. Further clarification and flexibility is needed. This was the catch-22 that has to do with everything being dependent on everything else before you can do anything. That's a problem, and I think that needs to be clarified. and the Midcoast Council agrees that that does. Reviewing water and wells is complex, and the mention of a new report that has not been reviewed makes final comment difficult. Until such a report is finalized and accepted, we feel it's appropriate to not allow further residential development relying on private wells. The Commission-approved language does this. That said, the Board should push the staff for a release of comprehensive, accurate report. We made this judgment based on the knowledge that this report is coming out today or very soon, and it will show that there is water in many places. And we feel, not being lawyers, that if there is not water at a particular lot, it wouldn't be a taking not to allow a well in that site. So, and rezoning the bypass lands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Dixon, followed by Kerry Burke.
Good morning. I'm David Dixon, General Manager of Coastside County Water District and a resident of Half Moon Bay. As the agency responsible for planning water infrastructure for a majority of the county midcoast, we've followed this process closely. I want to express my appreciation for the county staff's effort, particularly Steve Monowitz, who's been unfailingly patient, neutral, objective in answering our questions and addressing our concerns. I think we look forward to a day when our infrastructure planning would be governed by a consistent set of rules rather than by conflicting coastal development permits, certified LCPs, and other provisions imposed on appeal by the Coastal Commission. Mr. Monowitz called our planning situation potentially unsolvable. I'm not sure that whether you accept or reject the Coastal Commission changes significantly affects our position in that regard. As the staff report points out, we already are subject to permit conditions that impose significant limitations that give rise to this potentially unsolvable dilemma. What I can say, though, is that I think through your staff's efforts and those of the Coastal Commission staff with whom we've also worked, there have been a number of issues that have been resolved and that have been better defined in terms of our concerns for infrastructure planning. What I do not believe will bring us closer to resolution would be a one-year extension. So I know you have many other concerns that influence your decision. I can tell you that in terms of the public works aspects, I think substantial progress has been made between the county and the Coastal Commission. And I think that accepting or rejecting the changes is your choice. I would urge you not to extend. Thank you.
Okay. Kerry Burke, followed by Jennifer Tosto.
Good morning, I'm Carrie Burke, Half Moon Bay, and I'm here to also state my appreciation to staff, the board, and the community that we've all worked very hard on this LCP amendment process. However, I do recommend that you reject the Coastal Commission's modifications. And I think it's also so strange that they are termed modifications when they are such a gigantic change from our existing LCP. And I also reflect upon what the last few years have taught us, that the Coastal Commission, even with the powwow that was held back in September of 2009 that Supervisor Gordon attended with other elected officials to improve the process, what did that yield us in December? When we made the presentation, the reception was not an evidence of them cooperating with us in any manner. Our local community has acted in good faith over these years to come to some compromises, but what the Coastal Commission's plan is just unvetted changes that could have serious consequences for our community. So therefore, I want you to reject them. Also, David Byers and I both worked on the Sterling case, and that is one example of one family that had agony for over 3 years before the Coastal Commission. And thank goodness the judge upheld your decision to approve one house on 45 acres. 145 acres. And so how do you think the modifications that the Coastal Commission is proposing would impact the entire coast. And just because the Coastal Commission wants these modifications doesn't make them right and doesn't make them legal. Please reject the Coastal Commission's plans to modify our coast to their very narrow agenda. Thank you.
Jennifer Tasto, followed by Sabrina Brennan.
Good afternoon, President Gordon and honorable supervisors. My name is Jennifer Tasto, and I am the president of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. SAMCAR not only represents close to 3,000 real estate professionals, we also serve as advocates for the protection of private property rights and the creation of affordable housing. Our very competent staff person, Ms. Shawn Coleman, has submitted a letter to you regarding our position. It is with these concerns in mind that today we ask you to please reject the Coastal Commission's proposals for the Mid-Coast LCP. In our view, the Commission's proposals to remove land use planning from local control and serve only to bring any development along the Mid-Coast to an inevitable end. The proposals also ignore the community input and discussions that for over so many years helped to shape the LCP update. For these reasons, we respectfully ask the board to reject the Commission's proposals. We thank you for your time, deliberations, and efforts towards improving and protecting the Mid-Coast. Thank you.
Sabrina Brennan, followed by Paul Perkovic.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I'm Sabrina Brennan, and speaking as a representative of Critical Coastal Area 29, an important coastal watershed resource located in the unincorporated Mid-Coast. I'd like to make a couple of counterpoints in response to some of the earlier comments. Only one member of the public spoke in opposition to the Coastal Commission's suggested modifications at the Coastal Commission hearing on December 10th, 2009. San Mateo County is one of 2 counties in the state that will be most affected by sea level rise. Sea level rise was not taken into account in any of the Mid-Coast groundwater studies to date. Additional studies will be needed to provide a comprehensive groundwater plan and prevent saltwater intrusion. In 10 years, many more people will be living and working green by working from home. Rainwater catchment stops rain from replenishing the aquifers, and this is a well-documented problem. You can look to Australia to see what happens with that. I urge you to accept the California Coastal Commission's suggested modifications to the Mid-Coast Local Coastal Program update. Please prioritize the California coastline and help preserve coastal resources for future generations. In November 1972, voters passed the California Coastal Conservation Initiative, Proposition 20, and the state legislature enacted the California Coastal Act in 1976. San Mateo County coastal resources provide opportunities for ecotourism, healthy recreation, environmental education, and solitude to thousands of San Mateo County residents. Many years of effort and countless taxpayer dollars have been spent on the Mid-Coast Local Coastal Program update process. Stalling the process or attempting to roll back the California Coastal Act would be disastrous. Please accept the suggested modifications of the Coastal Commission and move this important process forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Perkovic, followed by L. Ross.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Paul Perkovic. I'm a resident of Montara. My comments are as an individual today. First, I'd like to echo what many have said. Steve Bonowitz has done an outstanding job on this, and I very much appreciated his presentation to the board and the public today. I think he gave a very balanced and even-handed presentation, even when the slides in the staff report may have been somewhat prejudicial in their comments. As an example, there's been an attempt by a number of people to portray the Coastal Commission as this totalitarian organization from another planet and as the boogeyman. And yet, imposing all of these things, attempting to impose all of these things on the county. And yet, if you look at a number of the suggested modifications, they come right out of existing county policies. The Coastal Commission did not make up the traffic levels of service and say these are what you need to have before you do further development. Those come from existing policies in the Public Works component. Those levels of service are already defined. The Commission did not make up the idea that Coastal Act priorities take precedence over local government priorities. That's the distinction over affordable housing. That comes out of Coastal Act sections 30250 and 30254. That's a long-standing Coastal Commission policy as reflected in staff reports we've seen over many years. I understand that the well issue is one that's very emotional for people. It makes sense to know that you are managing things on a proactive basis and not on an after-the-fact crisis management basis. That's not a well prohibition. It's essentially a temporary moratorium until there's a groundwater management plan in place, and then additional well development can continue. And finally, the lot retirement issue is really a balancing act. It's a zero-sum game attempt by the Commission to keep the number of developmental parcels constant. And if you add more in one place, it says take them away somewhere else. And that's not an unreasonable thing either. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. L. Ross, followed by William Bodoff.
Mr. President, Board, thank you very much for allowing me to be here this afternoon. The staffing report was excellent. There's been a lot of time, a lot of effort that's gone into this program. 10 years seems to have gone by rather quickly. I'm surprised it's already been 10 years. A few more months, maybe another year. What's that compared to 10 years for the ramifications of what we're going to be looking at here in the future? I think basically it's frightening to me that the Commission can have that much authority to change somebody's life as radically as they can. I trust you folks much more than I trust them. I'd like you to be the ones to make the decision in my life. You've always seemed to be very even-handed and diligent with what you do. I strongly recommend that you reject the Coastal Commission's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. William Bodoff, this will be our final speaker.
Mr. President, board members, my name is William Boteef, longtime resident of San Mateo County. I live at 922 Date Street in Montero. I have a home there. I don't own any other lots. I don't have an axe to grind. But I'd just like to discuss these four things that I got from the planning department. Prohibit non-residential and non-coastal act priority uses until traffic levels improve. I don't know what that means. Who's going to determine when traffic levels improve? And what are we going to stop? Are we going to stop the Halloween things? Are we going to stop the airport programs they have, the air things? Are all these things going to stop until traffic improves? And then who is going to be the bureaucratic control up here that's going to make that determination? It's scary. We're going to create another bureaucracy to determine when traffic is improved. Prohibit individual private wells within the urban area. I have a well. I have a lot of water. I have enough water for 25 houses. Are you going to take away my well? And then I have to hook up to Montero Water. I'm at the end of a 800-foot line. When they clean out the line, it smells so bad that you can't be around it. I don't want to hook up my house to their line. My water's beautiful. Are they going to take away my water? This is not addressed. Require land divisions to acquire and set aside as open space a number of vacant lots. Well, okay. We're going to take these vacant lots then. Are we going to take them off the tax roll? The day that you agree to this, are all these properties going to go off the tax roll? I think, the county already has a shortage of money. What's that going to do? What's that going to do to the budget? okay? Those things need to be thought. The Coastal Commission doesn't give a damn about the finances in San Mateo County.
All right, thank you, sir. Your time is up. Appreciate your comments.
One last comment, if I may. What I see here is that if this thing goes through, Mr. Murphy is going to have to increase his staff because this is going to be a permanent job increase for lawyers. That's what I see here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Adrian?
I'd just like to make a couple comments after all that we've heard. I guess the thing that disturbs me the most is that we've sort of been given an all-or-nothing approach, is the way I see the Coastal Commission putting this forward, which really, as someone said, circumvents the entire process. The time we've spent over the last 10 years. I mentioned earlier, I feel like we're in a catch-22. I say that because I think what they're basically doing is trying to put us in a lose-lose position. You know, if we reject it, we lose all the good works that we did. If we accept it, we're putting the onus of no longer having that balanced approach that I believe that we put forward. I think we had negotiated in good faith, and I would suggest, and this is obviously up for discussion, but they're asking us to accept or reject what they've put on the table, sort of not even looking at the balanced approach that we use. I would suggest we resubmit our balanced approach and put the onus on them to reject our approach that we took, because that's our job. So I throw that out to my colleagues. I think it's really a disservice that the Coastal Commission has done to us. There are some things, there could be some minor adjustments that we could possibly do with some of theirs, but in the big picture, I think they've really circumvented the entire process that we've put together.
Okay. I have a question for Steve. Under the Coastal Act, we're allowed to submit on an annual basis amendments to the local coastal plan. I mean, how many? What's the limit that we have?
Local governments can submit up to 3 amendment packages per year. There's no limit to the number of policy amendments contained in each submittal.
Because one of the things that I'm wondering is whether one of the ways to address some of this would be to consider also proposing, like an amendment package that does some of the things we want to see done. I'm not sure how to get there, but I'll talk to you later about that.
It would be possible, if the board's desire was to resubmit, to break it up into separate amendment packages. So, for example, if water quality was one of the priority issues that you would like to be addressed, we could submit the water quality changes as an independent amendment package. So that is an option that's available to us.
Okay. Other comments or questions from the board at this point?
I just comment. I'm going to kind of lean toward Adrian's position, because I think I would not want to lose all the work that we've done over the 10 years. That's my big concern. So I'm thinking about what she was suggesting and also what you just suggested. My concern about the amendments every year is that because we had done the entire review, I would want to lose all of that, and I think it may take too long. So that's my concern about that approach. I think that we have done a good job already. We have gotten phenomenal community involvement and engagement and input, and I think we presented them with what we felt is a good balanced approach to address all of the concerns that we had. So I think that we should actually stay the course and actually just resubmit what we have.
Okay. Supervisor Groom.
Oh, I was just rereading the letter that we received from the Coastal Commission staff yesterday, and the last paragraph says, "We hope to be available at your meeting tomorrow. We look forward to any opportunities for continued discussion and collaboration. Addressing and harmonizing the concerns of the Commission, the county, and the community is a substantial challenge, and we've all invested significant time and energy to put in place an updated LCP. We appreciate the county's ongoing commitment to this task." I think that Adrian's suggestion is an excellent one, but is there an opportunity before we resubmit to engage in a conversation and discuss what went on today, where we've had a number of people from our community make very intelligent comments on both sides of the issue. So we do have an engaged community, and I just wonder if a meeting would not be appropriate before we made a decision of what to do.
Let me just say that while we were in session here, I did receive a phone call from the commission, and Charles Lester, the staff person who wrote that letter, he apologized for not being here, but had a family emergency this morning that kept him from coming. But he did clarify that he is more than willing to engage in some discussion. So I think that could occur.
I have no problem with having another discussion, although I think we've had many discussions, and I'm not sure another discussion is going to be fruitful. I think the county has taken a very fair, balanced, and reasonable approach to the LCP. I think we have negotiated in good faith, and at this point, I don't see a willingness on the part, unfortunately, on the part of the Coastal Commission to do the same. I'm very concerned about the water prohibition issue, as well as the lot retirement issue. I think we are exposing the county unnecessarily to litigation if we adopt these suggested changes. The grandfathering issue is also a major concern, as was pointed out by Mr. Byers, and I have not decided one way or the other yet on the Big Wave project, but having invested $370,000 in a particular project and then changing the rules midway, I know where that's headed, and I've got a lot of concerns here, and even one of our own judges has ruled one of our own local judges has made a ruling indicating that some of these policies are unreasonable and an unreasonable taking with respect to this one case that Mr. Byers was pointing out, the Sterling case. So I have a lot of concerns. I'm always willing to continue to discuss. I'm willing to do another conversation with that in mind, but I'm prepared to support Supervisor Tissier's recommendation.
Let me make just a couple of comments, and then we'll conclude, I think. Just in terms of the concerns that I have with what we've been handed back from the commission, I do have particular concern about the lot retirement program, and as it would relate specifically to the conditional certificates of compliance. I found that very, very difficult, and then I can't imagine the kind of challenges we will have when we have retired lots that nobody manages. I mean, I just vacant lots that sit in the middle of a community without any ability to have anybody responsible for them. So I worry about that, I'm also concerned about wanting to make sure that we've been working for a long time to get a groundwater study so that we could understand and develop a plan for management. We're close, so I have some concern about the proposal around the wells, and then some of the challenges that I think we will face from folks if we adopt these rules and regulations submitted by the Commission to us. The legal issues, the legal challenges that we'll face. One of the things that's unclear to me, and Steve, maybe you can help me with this later, but the requirement to rezone the bypass lands, there are several properties in that area that currently have residential use, and people actually living in homes. What happens to those people if we're required to rezone the entire area for open space? I'm not clear what happens with those folks. So what I would suggest is that, following up on what Carol, that perhaps Carol and I, as president and vice president of the board, conduct one more meeting with the commission, understanding that we may get nowhere, but I think it will also demonstrate, at least from our perspective, that we will have gone to every extent possible to try to communicate our concerns and to clarify that the plan that we developed based on the input from our community and that I think most of us felt when we adopted it provided some balanced approach. So I think we'd like to do that.
I'd just like to make a comment. I'm fine with that. I guess what I'd like to do, though, we've closed the public hearing. I'd like to suggest that the recommendation that we're making is that we would submit our balanced proposal unless they could give us something to hang our hat on when the two of you meet, so that we don't have to come back. If you come back at the next meeting and say, we talked to them, this is what they want, that's it. We've already sort of given a recommendation of where we want to be if, in fact, there's no room to move.
Yeah. Well, I think that the staff certainly has heard the board today, and their plan was to prepare a recommendation back to us, and I think we have some sense of what that might be.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. That will conclude this item, and we'll move to item number 12, which is the mid-year report on performance. This has been reviewed by the Finance and Operations Committee, and if there's no questions on it, I would accept a motion to adopt.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the mid-year report on performance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Item 13, the county manager's report.
Nothing, Mr. President. Thank you.
And we'll move to item 14, the board member committee reports. I'll start with Supervisor Church.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask that we adjourn today's meeting in memory of two individuals. First, Daniel Thurston. He passed away on April 3rd in Millbrae. He was 70 years old. Dan was one of our community's most prominent and respected businessmen. He was a contractor for 25 years in the Bay Area and was an owner of the Millbrae Lumber Company, which is one of Millbrae's oldest businesses and has served our community for decades. Dan was also very active in community organizations and civic activities over the years and was a member of the San Bruno Lions Club. Our condolences go out to his wife, Lucille, his children, his entire family, his business partner, Alma Mazzolo, and his many friends and colleagues. I'd also like to ask that we adjourn in memory of Bob Welch, who passed away recently. Bob was a resident of Burlingame, where he moved in 1960 to teach. He spent 35 years at Hoover School, Franklin School, and Burlingame Intermediate School. As principal of Burlingame Intermediate, the school was recognized as one of the first distinguished schools in California and was selected by the National Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development as one of 25 schools in the nation to be a model middle school. In 1982, Bob became a founding member and served as president of the California League of Middle Schools. He also served as a liaison to the Association of California High Schools and received the 2007 Wall of Fame recognition from the Burlingame School District for outstanding service to the children and community of Burlingame. Our condolences go out to his wife of 53 years, Martha, their daughter, Bobby, his sisters, and their entire family. Thank you.
Supervisor Groom.
Thank you. I'd like to make a brief comment about Streets Alive, which was San Mateo County's first celebration of World Health Day. As most of you know, it rained, and it just didn't drizzle, it poured. But I want to thank North Fair Oaks and Redwood City and San Mateo and Millbrae and South San Francisco and the Coast Side and Burlingame and San Carlos, I know I left a city out, for setting up and trying to get going. And boy, the folks from Redwood City and North Fair Oaks, they really hung in. Belmont was the other city. Belmont had a bicycle race and had to give it up because it was just too dangerous. and Foster City also was going to do a walk from park to park and finally had to to pass on that. But I want to assure all of the folks who volunteered their time and got involved that we're meeting later in this week to wrap up, and we're starting the planning for 2011. We will not be daunted by the rain. And I would also ask us to adjourn in memory of a dear friend, Dave Barr. He was 82 years old and just recently died. San Mateo High School graduate, had Dave Barr Plumbing in the city of San Mateo for many, many years. And he and his wife, Pat, were devoted advocates and followers of Community Gate Path through all of its name, Poplar Center, Poplar Recare, and Community Gate Path. They were the forces behind the old wonderful haunted house that raised a lot of money for Community Gate Path. And Pat, and I want to extend our condolences to Pat and her children.
Thank you. Supervisor Tissier?
Yes, thank you. I have an adjourn in memory of Robert James Collins. He passed away on March 23rd at the age of 76 after recent heart surgery. He was a resident of Menlo Park, but how I had come to know him, he was an ombudsman for San Mateo County, and he also worked with our county's Elder Abuse Council, and he was also a very involved member with our Commission on Aging. So my sympathies go out to his wife of 50 years, Dorothea, and their children, and I know all of us on the Commission on Aging, he will be truly missed.
Supervisor Jacobs Gibson.
Thank you. I have one closing memory and then my little bit of a report on the census. On the closing memory of Thomas Bukaka. He's basically called Mabu Kakan. He's very well known in East Palo Alto, although I am one of the few who didn't get to know him as well. He was born on January 3rd of 1934 in Congo. He passed away on March 21st in East Palo Alto. He moved to the peninsula in 1959 and has been a beloved member of the community ever since. In addition to his 38-year career at Stanford University Medical School, he was also a very well-known musician and singer. He would be remembered as a dreamer and a man of great vision. He is survived by his many relatives and friends, as well as his wife, Nancy, his daughters, Regine, Maya Yuka, and Makipa. Those are, of course, African names that I don't pronounce very well. And I also want to report that our San Mateo County Complete Count Committee had a meeting last week, and it was a very, very good meeting because we looked at the mailback response rates, and that was one of the big topics, is how well we're doing. The county is at an average now of 69%. The national average is 66%. One of our big success stories is North Furrows, because it was a very hard to count area. It's at 74%. Oh. Yeah, already. So some of the hard to count areas, what we're going to be doing is going out and actually, like in the Pescadero, there were some areas where you have mailboxes, and so they're going to actually be going door to door to actually take them the questionnaires to get them and see if we get those completed. The other thing of note now is that April 1st is passed. So you have until April 19th to get your census questionnaires in the mail, because all of those that are not in the mail by the 22nd, that is when you're going to have the census workers knocking on your door. So the message today is, if you don't want a census worker coming to your door, mail the questionnaires back right now, because otherwise they're going to come and knock on your door. Okay? We want to get everyone counted, and so that's the goal for this year.
So, Rose, I was walking precincts on Saturday, and some guy yelled at me, "I've already turned my census form in."
Good, he got the message, didn't he?
You've done a good job. I have no other items for today, and we'll go to a closed session of the board. The board will return from closed session to report out if there are any reportable items. So with that, we're off to closed session. All right, the board has completed a closed session, and I would ask Mr. Murphy to report out, please.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board met in closed session to discuss all items on the closed session agenda except the last item, initiation of litigation pursuant to subdivision C of Government Code 54956.9, which was not discussed. In the matter of Darrell Ball versus County of San Mateo workers' compensation case, the board approved a settlement by way of stipulations with future medical care for Mr. Ball's colon cancer claim in the amount of $35,855.35 or 37% permanent disability. And that was all the reportable actions taken by the board. And with that, I'll close my report.
All right, and that will bring this meeting to an end. We'll adjourn and reconvene our next meeting on Tuesday, April 27th.